or
Oh, this is a theory that I've been thinking on for, gosh, 30, 40 years. I mean, I've been thinking about it probably 30 years. I wouldn't be 40. I'm 48. So,
yeah,
but I've been thinking about it for a long time. And it all kind of started with this whole, the whole theory of evolution, and do we follow evolution? Do we follow, creation model? And a lot of what I looked at, I mean, I read a lot from both sides. I was huge into dinosaurs. I'm still huge into dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I love dinosaurs. I will go to the Natural History Museum over any other museum any day of the week.
Yeah.
I love looking at rocks. I love looking at fossils. I'm fascinated by all of it. I have read every book that I could get my hand on about how radiocarbon dating works, how the measure of the bones works, and how they determine one species against another species, and how the fossil record was put together. I've read all of it. I love it.
I think we're going to have a lot to say on this together, because I've just been converted to a young earth creationist, I think. So let's get into this. This is going to be awesome.
So, and just for fun, a couple of nights ago, I had this weird dream that we had a Jurassic Park scenario where dinosaurs were rampaging around my house, and I had to protect my family. And this pterodactyl came down, except it had the body and the head of a crocodile. And my brain made up a new dinosaur. We called it the crocodactyl, and it was terrifying. So anyway, here's where my whole theory starts. Now, it starts with Jewish cosmology. Okay, you've got to understand what the Jews were looking at when they conceived the creation of the universe, and it was based on what Moses wrote in Genesis. But the Jews had written a whole lot on the conception of what the world was when it was formed. So you had the crust of the earth, and beneath the crust of the earth, you had the waters that were held up by columns, massive columns. So these columns were holding up the crust, and pretty much the ocean was underneath the surface of the earth. Genesis talks about how springs would maintain the watering of the garden of the earth.
So it didn't rain.
Well, it did, but not. It didn't really have to a whole lot. The waters came from below.
Okay.
And then above the earth, you had the waters above the heavens. Okay. So the waters above the heavens. What's that?
The firmament, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So the waters above the heavens were described, and the way that it would be understood would be like this vaporous canopy surrounding the earth. All right. So you have this vaporous canopy, you have the waters beneath. What's interesting is that in the description of the flood, it says that the gates of the depth opened, and then it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. So the start of the cataclysm of Noah's flood came from beneath, not above, which is it's a fascinating idea. So I started thinking, well, if the waters came from below, then it seems logical that the waters would have formed. I mean, it's kind of like popping a balloon, right? If you have a water balloon, you put a prick on it and everything snaps away from the source of the puncture, right? And it goes all the way around to the other side.
Yep.
Well, wouldn't the earth do the same thing? And I started looking at, because my dad was, he was a sonar tech in the Navy. He had a complete map of the ocean, the surface of the ocean. So, and it was all based on sonar readings. So with these sonar readings of the map of the bottom of the sea, I would sit there and I would spend hours just studying various parts of it and looking at the whole thing. What I realized is that starting in Iceland, you have this big baseball stitch that follows the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
Yeah.
Yep.
This baseball stitch is what divides Europe and Africa from North and South America. obviously if you put those stitches together, what you see there it is. You can see how America, South America, and Canada fit perfectly into Europe and Africa. Okay, it fits perfectly. What else is interesting is that if you can find an oceanographic picture of Iceland, Iceland is the only interruption of this entire stitch, this baseball stitch, north and south. And it makes no sense that there should be anything there. Why is there something in the middle of this mid-Atlantic ridge? What's more is that if you look at an oceanographic contour map of the ocean surrounding Iceland, it's an impact point. It looks like a meteor. What else is interesting is that Iceland is geothermically warmed, which means it's in constant contact with the magma of the earth.
Okay.
Here's something else. Iceland, if you look to the south where it says Saxnes or whatever,
Right,
you can see just beneath, if you go all the way around, you can see there's a circle that goes all the way around. It's an impact point. All right. So, boom. Iceland is right there in the middle of this baseball stitch. Iceland has high concentrations of iridium and nickel. Iridium and nickel are the two elements most commonly found in meteors.
Yeah.
So if Iceland is an impact point, then that baseball stitch that runs north and south is very likely the split that happened in the crust of the earth when the waters came rushing out. So then the waters would force the continents apart, okay, which is why if you look at the oceanographic contour of the United States and on the East Coast, there's a very long continental shelf. But on the contour of the western side, it's a really short continental shelf, really short. I mean, it just suddenly drops off. What else is interesting is that you have a mountain range that goes from the very top of Alaska, following the west coast of the United States, going all the way down to Mexico, going all the way down the western side of South America, all the way down to the very southern tip of Chile. Why is there a mountain range, a continuous mountain range north and south on the western side? Well, if you push two continents apart, what happens? You're going to collect dirt on one side, aren't you? Yeah. And then you're going to leave a long smudge on the other side.
Yeah, because usually mountains are formed by continents pushing together at those. Theory. Typically.
That's the theory.
Yeah.
It's not like we've observed it really.
Right. But what if the mountains were formed not from tectonic plates pushing against each other, but from, I mean, yeah, we do know that there are tectonic plates and there are earthquakes and that kind of thing. But what if the cause of the mountains wasn't the pushing of these tectonic plates, but the moving of these continents? Do you realize that if you were to go to the western side of that mountain range, you're not going to find any dinosaur bones? If you go to the eastern side of the mountain range, you're going to find all kinds of dinosaur bones.
Yeah.
Why would that be? Well, if the waters are rushing east to west, and they drive all of those creatures that they collect in the waters, and they slam up against that mountain range, and then the waters churn and churn and churn.
Like a little eddy.
Right
there.
And then what happens? They get buried. They get buried quickly. You get that compression that pushes down on them, which is why you have a sudden fossil record. So.
Yeah. So what? Okay. So we had what was his name came on with us, Rob?
Hugh
Owen.
Oh, yeah, he's great. I know Hugh. He's a good friend.
Yeah, Hugh Owen came on with us, and he just pointed something out that just blew me away. It's like, first off, they don't do radiocarbon dating on dinosaur bones.
They can't. It doesn't work.
That's not how they get it. They get it by seeing how far into the layers are the dinosaur bones. And he says they're doing figures based on the idea that the earth has always been the same with the same conditions. So you get the same amount of sediment every single year. So you could go back and say, okay, we see it that we got this much sediment or erosion in this much period of time. So just multiply that by however many years. And that's how you determine where inside the sediment you found the bone. That's how old it is. But if all of these insane cataclysmic events are happening during the flood, they always try to say that the dinosaur killer was a meteor, but I think it was the flood.
Well, it's both. It's both. I think
if Iceland is a meteoric impact at the same time that you're having this flood.
So all of this to explain how the flood happened and how we got the sudden fossil record and all of that in Pangea. Okay. Here's where things get weird. All right. Now, in Genesis, when Cain he kills Abel, and God curses him. Cain complains to God and says, "Well, now that you've put this mark on me, if I go into a town somewhere, the people are going to rise up and they're going to kill me." Where'd the towns come from?
Yeah, there's not supposed to be any people, right?
If Cain is the firstborn of Adam and Eve, where are the towns coming from? So obviously there are towns, but where did they come from? If Adam and Eve literally lived hundreds of years, like actually lived 900 years according to scripture, and Cain actually lived for, I think, like 700 years. If you look at this, well, we don't know exactly when it was that Cain slew Abel. Maybe they were 200 years old at the time. I don't recall. But if you look at a population growth model projecting that Adam and Eve could potentially be having children every couple of years for hundreds of years, and that once their descendants, starting at about, let's say the age of, let's just say 20, just to hit a modern number, and they start having children for hundreds of years. That population growth model, we went from a population of in the United States, I think we went from a population of a few thousand in the 1600s to 300 million in just about 400 years.
Yeah.
300 million in 400 years. That's just the United States. And we don't have people living for 100 years. Compress that, and suddenly you have a massive population growth model. The whole world could have been populated within Adam's lifetime. The whole earth. Okay? Now, what happens if you have a population of people all sharing the same language, all living for hundreds of years, being able to perfect on their inventions, being able to think and come up with new innovative ways to do things without having to retrain the next generation every 20 years before you die off? What happens?
You get a very fast advancement of technology.
Exactly. So what happens in the book of Genesis when Noah died, or when Noah was told that God was going to destroy the earth? Of course, Noah builds an ark and he collects all the animals and all that stuff. We know the story. Afterwards, the ark lands on top of a mountain. He lets the animals out, they settle, and he plants a garden of grapes. And he ferments the grapes. And what's the first thing he does?
Gets drunk.
Goes out and he gets sloshed.
Yeah.
He gets absolutely
he gets
smashed.
drunk.
Are you going to tell me the most just man in the entire world, the one man that God decided he was going to preserve his entire progeny through, that one guy, the first thing he's going to do is get drunk? I don't think so. I suspect he didn't get drunk on purpose. I think he drank what he was used to drinking. It's the airplane effect. If you go up into a higher elevation, what happens? The alcohol affects you faster and harder. Well, I think that what happened with Noah is that the atmosphere was now different.
Yeah.
Because if you have that vaporous canopy, here's the other thing. if you were to look at, and I'm jumping all over the place because I have all these thoughts that kind of go with this whole theory, but the dinosaurs are kind of a testament to the idea that man could have lived for hundreds of years. First of all, if you were to take a dinosaur and plop him down in the middle of Manhattan, he would suffocate. A full-grown Brachiosaurus would suffocate because his body cannot support his weight. The same thing with a Tyrannosaurus, the same thing with a Triceratops or a Stegosaurus. The massive body weight of these animals can't support themselves. But if you increase the atmosphere to about 2.2 times, suddenly they're able to support themselves because the atmosphere is denser. That buoyancy helps them to carry their body. We have fossils of dragonflies where the wingspan is like 2 feet. Okay. A 2-foot wingspan on a dragonfly cannot fly in today's environment because the proportionality of all of the chitin to the muscle mass to the buoyancy of the air, all that stuff, the way the calculation works, this creature, this 2-foot dragonfly, cannot fly. But if you increase the atmospheres to about 2.2 times, all of a sudden this thing can fly, which is a strong indication that the atmosphere was a lot denser. So in modern science, we have actually played around with what are called hyperbaric chambers, where we have increased the density of the air in these. We put burn victims in these chambers because it increases their healing rate. We've actually experimented with giant hyperbaric chambers. The Japanese did this. They created this big hyperbaric chamber and they raised tomatoes in it. And do you know that they created tomatoes the size of like soft? They were huge. Not quite a basketball.
So wait, that's what a hyperbaric chamber does? It increases the atmosphere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the opposite of a vacuum chamber. Same idea, just
yeah.
Wow.
So they increased the density. These tomatoes were huge. And not only were they big, but the plants were producing a massive abundance of these things. So there's
can I just cut you off? How cool is it that we're having this conversation? We're not just having Michael Hichborn on to talk about some drama in the church, like because everybody
it's really refreshing. Actually,
dude, everybody gets you on because some major story here. It's like, all right, let's get Michael from Lepanto Institute on. Listen, I'm riveted by this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just thought it was so cool.
Yeah, this is my hands down my favorite topic.
Yeah, let's go.
Hands down.
So wait, so you were talking about the tomatoes the size of pumpkins, basically.
Right, basically. So you have these massive fruits, which actually lines up with some of the fossils that we have of the massive plants that were found in the fossil record. So all of this seems to line up to the idea that there was a very dense atmosphere. So a dense atmosphere does two things. One, it reduces the aging process. Two, it accelerates the healing process. Add to that you have this vaporous canopy surrounding the Earth, and what are you also doing but reducing the intrusion of ultraviolet light, which is the number one cause of aging. It is the number one element to aging within what is this?
This is proof that Anthony can't last 30 minutes without hearing himself talk.
Listen, sometimes I'm caught up in the moment and I just want to make sure everybody really appreciates what I'm appreciating. I'm sorry. First off, this is the highest viewed live show we've had so far. So I think everybody's
actually
enjoying this.
No joke. So, that's great.
This is
for
the
real.
highest viewed live show. So yes, I'm sorry.
We hooked them with Israel and Palestine, and then we got them with Pangea.
There we go. So you have this vaporous canopy that's blocking out ultraviolet light. What else is that ultraviolet light, or what else is that vaporous canopy going to block out? Refraction. And why is it that Noah saw a rainbow when he came out of the ark?
Yeah, like why did that stick in his?
Because it was the first time that anyone had seen one.
Oh wow!
Which means the atmospheric conditions must have changed necessarily. They must have.
This is so crazy because any modern scientist would laugh at this, but this, like, it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
All of these things make perfect sense. And I'm so glad we had Hugh Owen on because I always knew evolution was nonsense, but I really for some reason I believed the narrative, and it took me realizing how much just like the media lies about everything, scientists have such an agenda at this point that you really can't trust anything that comes out of their mouths.
Right. Well, what they want to do is discredit scripture and force
Mhm.
everybody into an atheistic mindset. Either that or adopt some sort of pagan ideology with regard to the weather. Ooh, we've got
Yeah.
boogeymen that are creating
And
global warming.
and now we have Laudato Deum to
Laudato
really hammer
Dam.
that. Yeah. I want to go. Are you done, or because
Hold
I
on,
want to go
hold
back
on.
to?
We have one question on this. What
What are
Okay,
your thoughts
so-
on dragons, unicorns, and basilisks
basilisks?
Yep.
in the
Okay.
Psalter?
So I think that the dragons, I mean, you have to realize dragons don't just show up in the Old Testament. They also show up throughout the Old Testament, but they also show up in the time of Christ. After the time, Marco Polo wrote about seeing dragons when he went to China.
Yeah.
You also have Martha or Martha, yeah, Saint Martha. She and her family, Martha, Lazarus, Mary, they were forced after the death of Christ. They were all forced onto a barge without a sail and without a rudder. And the idea was that they were going to get swept out to sea and dashed against the rocks, and they were going to be sunk forever. Well, our Lord's providence brought that bark all the way down to southern France, and they landed in southern France. They met the French people there, the Celts, and they started converting them. And one of the stories was that Martha was brought to the village because there was a dragon that was menacing the area. And she went and she tied a ribbon around the dragon's neck, led it into the village, and they killed it. Okay, so the question of dragons, I think the dragons are basically leftover dinosaurs. I don't think the dinosaurs were wiped out with the flood. I think the dinosaurs were basically giant creatures that had lived for hundreds of years. Because what does a lizard do? How does it grow? It grows in accordance with its age.
Mm-hmm.
So every snake, every lizard, every reptile, they continue to grow from the moment they are conceived
Until
to the
die.
time they die. They never stop growing. Now, we see large crocodiles, saltwater crocodiles that are 30, 40 feet long. Why? Because they're like 120 years old. But what happens if you have these things living 400 years old or 700 years?
Yeah.
Suddenly you're going to
Mhm.
have these massive creatures.
Especially under those previous conditions you were talking about, where it would sustain something to live that long.
Right. On top of this, you have the book of Job, where our Lord describes Behemoth. The way he describes Behemoth, it sounds an awful lot like a Brachiosaurus,
Yeah.
a
it
long
does.
necked dinosaur. And we've got artifacts. You can look through ancient artifacts and you'll find depictions of Brachiosauruses, long necked dinosaurs with these long, massive tails. You'll see depictions of other dinosaurs. There's a temple in India called Angkor Wat, and Angkor Wat has what looks an awful lot like a Stegosaurus right there carved into the entryway. So the idea of dragons, I think that they're basically leftover dinosaurs. Job also describes Leviathan as a fire-breathing dragon. It breathes fire. So why not? Unicorns. We don't really know what a unicorn was. All we know is that unicorn means one horn. It could have meant there's a species of ancient rhinoceros. Yep, there it is. There's a species of ancient rhinoceros that has this one massive horn, and rhinos are known for being extremely ill-tempered and nearly impossible to take down. So the description of the unicorn could be a reference to that, but we don't know for sure. Well, and the third one was basilisk, probably another form of dinosaur just left behind afterwards.
What's a basilisk?
It depends
Giant snake, more or less.
Oh, okay.
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mythology says that the basilisk it had poisonous breath like its poison breath would kill you if you breathed on you, or there you go.
This is a Siberian rhinoceros.
Yep.
Wow. So I want to go back to that period of time you were talking about after when the Earth is getting populated and we get this huge advancement of technology really quickly, because you also have the Nephilim around at that time, right?
And we have no idea what that means.
So, because I really kind of think that
it loosely translates as giants. That's all.
Giants, and if you look at the pyramids and you look at these giant monolithic structures throughout the world, if there were these giant-like creatures, it would explain how they were able to build these things that seem impossible to us to build, because we think that technology only advanced from what we think it did, but you don't know the technology that exists before the flood. They could be technology greater than we have today, but something about technology and the advancement of technology leads to man's downfall, because you see that happens, and that's why God floods the earth. And it's almost as if the things we're seeing today, this rapid advancement of technology over the past 150 years, is also going to lead to our downfall. And another flood just won't be a water flood, but it'll lead to something where God has to put an end to it, because it's building a Tower of Babel, essentially.
That's exactly where I was going with this. You ready for the next part? So, following on this idea that there would be a massive rise in technology. By the way, there are ancient ruins that seem to indicate that the movie Oppenheimer came out over the summer. I didn't see it because I heard that there was nastiness in there, and I didn't want to see that. But
apparently watching that movie is a bigger sin than actually dropping the bomb. So, I mean,
right. So the thing that Oppenheimer said after they tested the atomic bomb, he quoted an ancient Hindu text called the Mahabharata. And the text that he quoted said, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Yeah. There's another ancient Hindu text called the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita talks about this huge war that takes place between two vastly, highly technologically advanced people. And they're flying around in these machines they call vimanas. And from these vimanas, it described them as shooting arrows at each other that would find their targets traveling on a beam of light. What does that sound like to you? Like arrows, a laser-guided missile, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. They also described these cities that were above the clouds, kind of like the International Space Station. And from these cities, this one guy, he donned the armor of the gods, basically, and he fired this arrow down at a city, and it destroyed the city. The way it was described in the text was that it erupted like 1,000 parasols of light. It contained the power of the universe.
Like 1,000 suns, huh?
And it rose in a column of incandescent flame and smoke. A column. And then it said that the birds nearby turned white and fell out of the sky. And people who survived, their hair and their fingernails fell out. It says that in the text.
Sounds like radiation poisoning.
Absolutely.
Sounds like a nuclear bomb, yeah.
Uh-huh. So you start to put the pieces together and you say, maybe this isn't the first rodeo. Maybe this isn't the first time that we've had this. Why did Oppenheimer quote an ancient Hindu text? And what else is interesting is that the ancient Hindu text is something that was heavily sought by both the Allies and the Nazis prior to World War II.
Himmler went on special missions to the Indian subcontinent.
What were they looking for? What did they find? These are the things that we're not going to find out in history books.
Right.
But there was a race on with all of these different countries prior to the Second World War looking for something. They were going all over the world looking at ancient ruins. I mean, the Indiana Jones phenomenon, it's a fun adventure, but there really was a race of archaeologists and paleontologists going to these different sites. They were looking for something. What did they find? I don't know. I don't know what they found, but Oppenheimer quoted.
And the
Oh, sorry.
war described by the Bhagavad Gita is very similar to like the stories of the Aesir versus the Vanir in the Norse mythology, similar to the Olympians versus the Titans in the Greek mythology. I mean, the whole, little g god versus
Versus the
God thing
Titans. Yeah.
is very universal throughout human history.
So there is something that connects it all. There's something fascinating about this whole thing. I think that there's a whole study that could be done just on this topic alone. But where I was going is because you brought up Babel, right? If we read Genesis 11, it says this, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of Adam were building. And he said, behold, it is one people, and they have one tongue, and they have begun to do this. Neither will they leave off from their designs till they accomplish them indeed. Come ye therefore, let us go down and there confuse their tongue, that they may not understand one another's speech. And so the Lord scattered them from all the lands of the earth, and they ceased to build the city. And therefore it was called Babel. There are other translations that seem to indicate that God was saying that we have to stop them because they're going to be able to accomplish something.
Yeah.
And what that thing is not stated. But if Adam or if Noah came from a civilization, he and his children came from a civilization where they had built up this massive technology. Let's say you and I and a few of our friends and our families were saved from a massive cataclysm. What are we going to tell our kids about? We're going to tell them about big cities and cars and airplanes. We're going to tell them about bulldozers and tractors and American football because it's a great sport. And we're going to tell them all these things. And what are the kids going to do? They're going to remember the stories. They're going to say, okay, this was done. This was possible to be done. How can we do this? And they're going to apply their knowledge, and they're going to start working towards this. And as they do, they start building a city. And they said, let us build a tower to the heavens. I don't know exactly what a tower to the heavens would look like, but there was a reason why God stopped them. And he struck their tongues. If we look today at what is happening in the world, I think that the world right now is operating under an inverse of what took place from the Tower of Babel back to Adam. So starting with the Tower of Babel, what do we have? Man started collecting the ability to speak in one common tongue. We have all sorts of instant translation sites that you can, I can look at something in real time, a sign in real time in Japan with my phone, and I can see an instant translation. I can hold my phone up, talk to somebody in Japan, and my phone will translate to them for me, speech to speech.
And AI is going to make that even faster and better. It's going to be crazy.
But what happened in the church? The church was united by one language. The church, through being united in that one language, had that tower to heaven, straight to heaven. So united in one language, and automatically we are elevated to heaven. That language was struck by the devil. And now we all speak our own tongues. And what has that done? It's caused confusion in the church. And that confusion has spread to the point that we are now no longer united. We're no longer operating in the same direction towards that heavenly goal. We're talking about the world. We're talking about the stupid weather. And we're accepting pagan idols as gifts in the Vatican. So I think all of this is a step towards the inverse of what happened in Genesis. And I do think that what this is a fulfillment of what God meant when he said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns.
You know what are true universal languages in the world? And it's directly related to technology. It's binary code.
Oh, that's a good point.
I mean, that's, every programming language, uses more or less uses it.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, the traditionalist Catholic says God is anti-one world government, but yes, but not really if it's done through the church, right? Like Christendom could have worked if it was properly done. It could have been a one world government with, if you had Christ as king. The problem is this one world government they're trying to do has nothing to do with God, and they're trying to do this human fraternity thing. It really is an inverse, but it's our new attempt at a Tower of Babel.
Yes. Yeah, because what they're trying to do is create a worldly one world government without God. God doesn't really care about local politics.
Yeah.
What God cares about is the salvation of souls and how we are united for the effort to save souls. If we're not united in that effort, then we're not doing anything. And we're as Ecclesiasticus says, vanity of vanities, all is vanities. So we're not operating in the idea that we need to create a one world government for world peace and global this and global that, and everybody's going to have food and plenty. We have plenty when we have Christ and we're united in Christ and we're united towards salvation. That's what God meant when he tried to unite all of the people under the same, who cleaned up all the poop on the ark.
Yeah.
Probably Ham, which is why he did what he did.
Yeah, he was probably resentful. Yeah. But at the end of the day, and I do think that we start tracing it back, what we're going to see is that we have to we cannot understand the passion without understanding the fall of Adam and Eve. It's impossible. It makes no sense unless you connect the two. And in that respect, you cannot understand world events today without understanding the flood and without understanding the time of Lot and what happened there. Because all of those times, our Lord directly linked them. And in fact, the miracle of Fatima tied them all together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is you're looking at the city of God versus the city of man, essentially.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you go back and read Augustine, because I really started reading that book again recently. I've been listening to the audiobook as I go to sleep. But what Augustine is describing is he's in the city of man with all these pagan idols all around him, but he sees the city of God increasing. And despite man's temptation to sin and their temptation to do wrong, you still saw the kingdom of heaven increasing on the earth and God's spirit covering the earth and subduing the earth in his time. He sees this happening. And what we're seeing now is just the reverse effect of that. It's a reversing of that whole entire process that happened as Christendom spread throughout the world.
You know what else is interesting is that Atlantis is described as a series of islands.
Oh, Rob, bring this up. Me and Rob wanted to get you on to talk about Atlantis. This is
That's
so
right.
funny. We just talked. This is so funny.
In the Atlas, south of the Atlas Mountains, right? Is that where?
Yeah. Well, I actually think that the capital of Atlantis I think we know exactly where it is. I think it's the Rishat structure in the Sahara Desert.
The Eye of the Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is so cool.
So if you take the civilization of Atlantis, and it makes sense that because there's another text, and I can't remember what it was, but it described the war between the Atlanteans and these peoples that kind of fit the region of India. And it was this massive war and terrible disaster and everything else. But you look at the what Plato described as Atlantis, a series of islands. There's the Rishat structure, yeah. A series of islands, and they were ruled by 5 sets of twins. And the Atlantis sank into the ocean. Okay, that's the whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially the story in a nutshell. In Genesis, you have a red dragon with 7 heads and 10 crowns. 10 crowns, 5 sets of twins, okay, coming out of the ocean. So could it be that what we're looking at is that, and of course you read the occultists and what they tell you is, oh, Atlantis is going to rise again. You know, all these prophecies that Atlantis is going to come back. Well, what if it's already here in the form of the global civilization that we have created for ourselves? For crying out loud, I'm talking to you on an open window.
Right. And,
I
you're
mean,
hundreds of miles away. Rob is hundreds of miles away
Yeah.
from both of us.
right. And here we are, we're talking as if we're in the same room, and it's normal to us. This is magic. Come
Magic.
on.
It really is. That's what technology is. It blurs the line between what could be. It's magic.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It is magic. I mean, I don't know how this works, and I'm sure there's science behind it, but effectively, if somebody from 100 years ago was to look at this, they'd go, black magic, and they'd curse me or whatever. But ultimately, what we have here is a vast technological. We went from horse-drawn buggies to putting a man on the moon in 60 years.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. There has to be an influence on that. There's no way we did that.
I don't think that we did. I mean, look, in 1890, the very first Ouija board was patented in the United States. And then sales for Ouija boards skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Who do you think was using Ouija boards? Industrial technologists.
Yeah.
And they were using them big time.
Listen, when you look on the Manhattan Project, some of the guys on the Manhattan Project were out in the open occultists.
Mm-hmm.
Like out in the open occultists. These guys were playing with witchcraft to figure this thing out.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, Jack Parsons, who was the leading rocket scientist in the United States, he was using a Ouija board, and he was actually a contemporary with Aleister Crowley. Okay. And he was good friends with L. Ron Hubbard.
Rob, pull up a picture of him in full occult outfit.
Who? Crowley?
No. What was the other guy's name?
Jack Parsons?
Look up Jack Parsons. There's pictures of him wearing like this occultist outfit. I mean, these guys were out in the open with just playing with witchcraft.
There were rumors, and I don't know how true they are, but there were rumors that Nikola Tesla was a spiritualist.
I believe it. He was playing.
I wouldn't doubt it, but I mean, you just follow the trends. I mean, where you find these technologists, you find, here we go. Yep, there you go. There's Jack Parsons on the on the right hand side.
Yeah, these guys were all playing with demonic stuff. I mean, it's just wild, and they weren't even hiding it.
No, well, I mean, they were, but they weren't. But the fact of the matter is, you have the invention of the Ouija board in 1890. Do you know how long that was? That was, 6 years after Pope Pope Leo XIII had that vision of the devil talking to Christ.
Yeah, that's
saying,
right.
give me more time and more power, and I will destroy your church. And Christ said, well, how much time and how much power? He said about 75 to 100 years, and more power over those who would give themselves over to me. What does he mean by that? More power over those who would give themselves over to me. And then suddenly 6 years later, you have a patent for the Ouija board. And then you have an explosion in technology. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. That was just so rapid, right? The Industrial Revolution hits, and the next thing you know, I mean, even the motor vehicle, but beyond the motor vehicle, once television happens, it just goes so fast from there. And in our technological age today, it would be almost impossible to keep sin from taking hold of a culture with the way technology works today. It's just, if you really look at the smut that's on the internet at this point, it has captivated the hearts and souls of so many people. I know so many men who won't even consider going to church or that God is real because they don't want to confront that one shameful thing they have in their lives. So they'd rather just hide in the garden and pretend God doesn't exist so that they can continue with the stupid iPad. It's crazy.
There are literally billions of people walking around with a portable porn theater.
But more than that, you have to think about what they're doing. They're giving a part of their soul to an image. There's never been idol worship performed in the scale that it is now.
And now those images are being generated by AI.
by AI. It's magical, and people are giving themselves over to worship these things. If you're giving your heart to some image on your screen, and you're actually you have to realize what these ancient idols were. These ancient idols were
most of them were sex idols.
Exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are these images that people would have these orgies around. Now think about what you're seeing on the internet and people giving a part of their soul to it and pushing God out of their life for this idol in their life. Mm-hmm. And we look at something like the Pachamama or that thing that Cindy McCain brought, and we're like, ooh, idol worship. But none of us think about the idol worship going on in every single home in America where there's an internet connection.
Right.
It's crazy what's going on today.
Yeah, God seeing the wickedness of the men was great on the earth, and that all the thought of their heart was bent upon evil at all times. Man. That's what it says in Genesis about the flood of Noah, that evil was on their heart at all times. When you have men that are completely addicted to pornography, what winds up happening, you've got the corruption of children. Yeah. You have the corruption of women now too, who are, they're looking for love. They're looking for relationship. They're looking for stability. And of course, because the men are perverted, they're perverted too. And the net result is that all of them are looking for a fix somewhere, somehow. Yeah. And that fix is coming in the form of a dopamine release, whether it's a hookup or whatever it is. And of course, we've got the sacrifice industry to Baal through abortion. It's the whole thing is cyclical. It's all of the idols have come back mm-hmm. and they've come back in full. And I tell people, look, everything that is happening right now is unique in this time in history only because, and people have told me, oh, but it's been bad before. Look at the Arian heresy and look at Julian the Apostate and look at this and look at that. And I said, you know what? It was localized.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that we are able to share this information on such a wide scale and have these conversations through a window like we're having right now puts it in a grand scale in a way, because Rob has said that to me too. He's like, well, look at what happens in communist Russia or things like that. It's like, yeah, but that's localized in one country. But what we're seeing happen now is on a worldwide scale where we're all sharing a consciousness in a way that we never have in human history before.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Did we ask Hichborn about about his moment of vigilante justice up in Northern Virginia?
Wait, that's right.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was participating in a traditional Latin Mass march from Arlington to Washington D.C., where I don't know how many miles we walked, but it was really hot and I was very tired. And I was talking to this guy. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, there's like a commotion, and somebody is kind of crouched down, and he's messing with the bottom of a door. And I look up; it's this glass door, and I see this guy come rushing towards the door, and he's like pounding on the door, trying to get out. And I'm saying, "What is going on?" The guy says, he's trying to rob my store. So I went over and I just held the door shut. I worked with him to hold the door shut, and the guy that I was talking to, he's also holding the door shut. So the three of us are trying to hold the door shut while the store owner is trying to lock the bottom of the door. This guy is pounding his way out. He forces his left arm through the door, and he's trying to get out, and he can't get out. I'm up high, and the other two are down low, so I'm the only target. And he reaches his hand, he goes, paff, right across my face, sends my glasses sprawling. Oh, yeah, he was strong. That guy was, he packed a bit of a wallop, but of course it made me mad. So I jammed his arm real hard with the door, and he was yelling, and he pulled his arm back in, and I didn't care if I cut his fingers off at that point. So I'm sitting there holding the door shut, and I'm calling for the cops, and the cops come over, and and they're like, okay, what's going on? And I explained to them what I saw. The store owner's talking to them. They go talk to the guy separately, and finally, one of the cops comes out, and I'm listening to the guy. He's there going, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. And then he goes, this is so racist, man. This is so racist. I can't get arrested. It's so racist. And I was any sympathy I may have had for him,
Just
I
done.
just went, nope.
Yeah.
I raised my hand. I said, I want to press charges. He struck me.
Yeah. Good for you.
You know, and the cops never called me, so I don't think they actually pressed charges.
Yeah.
No.
Unfortunately.
Nah, they don't do that anymore.
No, of course not. But hey, you know, he did strike me, and they were gonna let him go, and I figured, no.
Nah, just make it a little more difficult for him. Even if
Yeah.
he just gets a disturbing the peace charge or something, you know,
Right.
just something
Yep.
difficult. I mean, come on. You're gonna go in and pull this stuff. It's crazy. Our culture is just collapsing all around us. Everything's falling apart. There's no law and order anymore. I mean, you talk about a state of lawlessness.
Mhm.
You know, man, this is Michael. This was such an. Let me tell you something. I got done with work. I walked in my door at 7:25 p.m.
Mhm.
I ran in the house. I took a shower real quick. I didn't even eat dinner, and I came down here. I'm like, I don't know how much I even have to give this show tonight. I was so tired. You just took us on. This was one of my favorite shows we've done, man. You are
Awesome.
Now we know he knows all about all the cool stuff.
but from the first time we had Michael on, it was never the Lepanto Institute. We've never talked about the Lepanto Institute with you, man.
Not
Like,
too much.
if you guys have the first time Michael was on, we had him on with Joshua Charles, and we did blue
Still
collar
the best
eschatology.
thumbnail I've ever done.
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious. But if anyone doesn't know, I met Michael at the Canceled Priest conference, and I kind of just like forced myself to be his friend. like Michael, I've been watching you for years, man. We have a common friend, Joshua Charles, and me and Michael hit it off. We had such a good time at that conference. We just hung, had a couple of beers together. I'm like, I can't wait to get you on with us. And Michael, you've been one of my favorite people that I've met over the last year, man.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I actually love doing this show. I mean, this is, you told me to dress down.
Dress
so I don't
down,
have to,
come and hang, man.
We do have one question about a topic you may know about here.
Okay.
What about the dog-headed men?
Dog
Do you
men.
know much about them?
Yeah, so the dog men, it's
Isn't that St. Christopher?
What's
One
that?
of them.
St. Christopher was a dog-headed man, right?
So in iconography, and I think they're referring to iconography. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
There's a particular reference to the dog-headed men, and it's symbolic of something. It's not literal.
No, I think it's symbolic of the monster or the things on the margins, right? So
right.
It's kind of funny because Francis is talking in all this language. We need to go to the peripheries and we need to go to the outer edges,
dragons, right?
That's really what's going on, where Francis is trying to incorporate the margins in a way they shouldn't fit, you know, and that's the problem. There's supposed to be a margin. There's supposed to be it goes into the symbolism of why we have gargoyles on the outside of churches. The gargoyles are monsters that ward off other monsters. It's a strange thing. I mean, Jonathan Peugeot talks a lot about this kind of stuff. But if you know more than I do, I didn't mean to jump in and cut you off.
No, that's all right. What the dog-headed men reference, I think, is just monsters on the peripheries that, you know, you go into the peripheries, you don't know what you're going to find. I mean, for crying out loud, St. Columba encountered the Loch Ness monster.
Yes, that's right.
St. Brendan encountered a sea monster when and not a whale, but St. Brendan, when he was navigating his way to the Americas, encountered a sea monster. You know, there's something interesting in the book of Job. At the very end of the book of Job, when he's talking about Leviathan, talks about this creature that is so huge and so immense. And there's a strange phrase where it seems to indicate that this thing is going to become manifest at the end of the world. But it's this huge sea monster that lurks around at the bottom of the ocean. We're not going to see it until the last age. But if you read the story of Thor and the Midgard serpent, you get this mythology that talks about how Thor is going to do battle with the Midgard serpent, which is this giant serpent that's biting its own tail, encompassing the entire world.
What's that called? The chupacabra.
Oh no, chupacabra is the goat sucker.
Oh, okay.
You're thinking of what? Jormungandr or something like that?
Yeah, the creature that rises at the end of the world. So
Yep.
it's interesting the way you get certain things in. See, I have a theory that actually the Greeks stole a lot of the prophecies and myths, or, well, stories from the Jews during one of the captivities. Who do you think Hercules is? He's Samson, obviously. I mean, both of them are wearing a lion's skin. Both of them completed certain tasks. I mean, it's pretty obvious that one is the same. The story, I was just telling my kids about the story of Jason and the Argonauts. Jason, who traveled to the ends of the earth to find the golden fleece that was hung in a tree that, when retrieved, would provide peace and healing to the people. And what happens? This fleece, this golden fleece, is guarded by a 7-headed dragon that Jason has to kill in order. But the 7-headed dragon has to be put to sleep by a virgin, the potion of Medea. So you look at that entire myth, and you look at it through a Catholic lens, and it's very clear. The golden fleece is Christ hanging in a tree, bringing healing and salvation to the land. And the virgin Medea, she is the one who lulls the dragon to sleep. I mean, all of this kind of rolls together, but I think that the Greeks and the Babylonians were hearing from Daniel, and Daniel was telling them this story and that story.
So there's an apocryphal story of Alexander the Great coming, and he was going to enter the temple, and they read to him the prophecies of Daniel and about the golden head and the chest of silver, and that he would be this great king, and he didn't invade the temple because of that story.
And then Pompey the Great did it a few hundred years later and got killed.
Yeah,
right.
And there's what else is I gonna say? Oh man, I just lost it. Well, there's also, we were talking about like monsters on the periphery. If you read the story of the Green Knight, the Green Knight was basically one of King Arthur's men, and when he travels to peripheries, he finds monsters and he finds giants and things like that too. You see a lot of the symbolism too, you know. But I also think, like you're saying, you kind of see echoes of Christianity in these other stories and stuff. Part of that, I think, is God prepares all of our hearts to receive this story, you know. So what you get is almost like a preparation of the Greek mind through these stories about a God who rises from the dead and things like that, almost to prepare them for when the Logos comes. And that's why when St. John says in the beginning was the Logos, like the Greeks were trying to understand, what is the Logos? What is this thing that brings all things together? And then St. John comes in and talks about in the beginning was the Logos, and it just sets the Greek mind on fire. And it's Greek, Roman, and Hebrew culture. The three of those coming. You have the organization of the Roman Empire. So you have it set up like the Roman Empire, where you have the Pope sitting as Caesar in the middle of Rome, and you have these Roman outposts where you have governors like Pontius Pilate is ruling Jerusalem. These are basically bishops in all the dioceses. So you have the church itself modeled after the Roman Empire, but it has the mind of the Greek to go in and do the theology with the philosophy of the Greek mind, and it's this explosion of Christianity just coming in at the perfect time in history for it to seed the earth like that.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating the way our Lord kind of guides history. If you look at the, I don't want to beleaguer these points too long, but if you just look at the Punic Wars, okay, the Punic Wars that led to the dominance of Rome. Rome should have been destroyed in the Second Punic War when Hannibal crossed the Alps and attacked Rome. He demolished their army, decimated them. In a literal sense, decimated means broken up into 10 parts. And they all scattered. But the Roman resolve allowed them to get back together and to fight Hannibal all the way back to Carthage. They took over everything in the Mediterranean at that point. And all that was left was Carthage. But the Carthaginians were not wiped out until after the Third Punic War. And it was because Cato, every speech, Carthago delenda est. And it was loosely translated as, and I resolve that Carthage is destroyed. In other words, it's not done in the past tense or the future tense, it's current tense. It is destroyed. And it's a fascinating thing to consider if you look at it in terms of the spiritual life, that Carthage is the last vestiges of the old world. It's the last vestiges of the old man, because Carthage was the center of all of the commerce, all of the culture, all of the religion. It dominated everything. But Rome, which was actually a people of the family was very central to them. They were a very patristic civilization, and they hated child sacrifice. And they thought that, the Romans never practiced they would do things like leave children and,
but it wasn't part of their cult.
Exposure was one of their things, but never as a sacrifice to the gods. They found that abhorrent. And they were horrified when they saw what the Carthaginians would do, which is why they warred against them. So when the Romans surrounded Carthage, well, first, they couldn't go to war with Carthage until there was a resolution. So they had to be resolved. Yes, we're going to wipe out Carthage. And it was Cato that brought that resolution about. In the spiritual life, we don't reach spiritual perfection until we make that resolution that says, I'm not going to have any attachments to the world anymore. I'm going to actually resolve to no longer have these material attachments where I curse at the TV screen during a football game on Sundays, which I don't do. But whatever the little material attachments we have, it's that severing of the last vestiges of that. So when you have that severing of the last vestige, that's when Carthage is truly destroyed. And what did they do? They not only razed it to the ground, they salted the earth to the point that you can't see anything growing there even today.
Yeah.
So they destroyed Carthage. And it was then that Christ was able to come into the world. Because the last vestiges of the demonic old world had been put to rest.
And the Carthaginians were the last of the Canaanites. They were Phoenicians, just like the Canaanites.
If you guys want to hear Michael, actually this is his third time on with us. The first time was with Joshua Charles, but we had Michael on. He came on with us, and we actually pretty much the whole episode we discussed the Punic Wars, and Michael really showed us like how he saw it as an analogy to the spiritual life and stuff. So if this is your first time checking us out or first time seeing us with Michael, this is his third show with us, and none of them have been on topical issues. I mean, we did the beginning of the episode about Israel and Palestine, but it was just because that's in the news and stuff. Mm-hmm. Every single time we get you on, I'm blown away by how knowledgeable you are, how fun it is to talk to you, man. You're such a fun person to talk to.
I'm gonna have to change the name of this episode.
Yeah, definitely. Well, maybe we should cut that first clip up and separate it from the rest of the show, because they're two different shows, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, either way.
Michael, if you want to put this whole conversation, we'll edit it, and if you want to put it on your channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to.
That would be great to introduce your audience to us and stuff. And if you ever want to have us on there, I mean, I don't know. You know what it is? You're very interesting. We're kind of just good hosts, so I don't even know what we would talk about on your channel.
We can talk about beer and football.
Oh, man. So, guys, this was a great episode, man. I'm going to ask everybody, if you haven't yet, please like, subscribe. If you guys are new to our channel, just checking it out for the first time, please subscribe. We're trying to bring something a little bit different here. I think if you guys watched the show tonight and didn't think it was unique in the Catholic content world, I don't know what you guys are watching. Please send me a link to it, because this was such an interesting and fun show to do.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. I'm so glad you contacted me yesterday and said, "Hey, get your butt out of bed and get on my show."
he's like, I'm sick in bed. I'm like, I hate to put you on the spot, but you know,
he's gonna need another 2 days to recover, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
Michael, does anything you ever need us to promote, man? If there's anything you ever need from us, like, you've given us at least 6 hours of solid content at this point, man. I owe you anything you ask.
You bet, anytime.
Yeah, you're a great guest, man. We're gonna get you back on soon. I want to do a blue collar eschatology sequel with Joshua.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love it.
Yeah, I reached out to him today to see if he wanted to come on, but he just went away on a retreat with his college fraternity buds. And...
what we should, when we do that, we should go deep into what Israel actually has to do with the eschaton.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. And actually show people a proper understanding of what we think, what the church teaches on it, and not because it's easy to get caught up in listening to some of the Protestants out there that do throw these weird things that they take a Bible verse out of context, and it just kind of, it sounds like it fits, but it doesn't really fit the way that it's supposed to. So also Daniel O'Connor reached out to me.
Yeah, his book just came out over the weekend.
Yeah, so his book's out. He said things are finally starting to calm down. I sent him a few dates. He's going to get back to me, and
his book. I'm getting his book should arrive in the mail tomorrow. So
I'm going to get the
huge.
audio.
It's like 700 pages.
I know it is. He's a brilliant guy, man. But he was also another great guest. I just the people that we've met over the past year, man, have been so interesting. I can't wait until we have a big enough audience that we could do a conference together and get all of you guys together at a conference. That's going to be so fun, man.
That would be a lot of fun. I'd love it.
Yeah. So, all right, Michael, what do you got to promote?
Just keep an eye on the Lepanto Institute. We've got a couple of big reports coming out soon. We have a report on Jesuit refugee services, which is it's exactly what you expect it to be. They have serious problems, but we have a report coming out on them very shortly. I have another report coming out on a situation in Milwaukee that I'm working on. Hopefully that'll be out sometime later this week. But in November is when we have our big reports. I can't say a whole lot about it right now, but we have documentation, on the ground evidence, hidden audio recordings.
Can we get you on when that happens? When that comes out? All right, let's do that. I want to get you on and actually discuss a Lepanto story. That would be so cool.
But
also,
it's going to be a big story when it comes out.
Michael has the Lepanto Institute YouTube channel too. So go subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's trying to grow that as well. So, dude, I can talk to you all night, man. This is so fun. All right, so we'll pick it up.
When Anthony says that, he means it, because I've seen him up until 3 a.m. just talking.
Yeah,
I don't know that my lungs will hold out that long.
Well, next year's retreat that we do, Michael's definitely coming, man. That's for sure. We're gonna make sure we don't book it the same weekend as the Catholic Identity Conference next time.
There we go.
So, all right, guys, thank you so much for hanging with us, guys. Please share this one. This was a good one to share to introduce people to us. So, if you guys have, when you're at mass on Sundays,
we have almost 1,000 views already.
No kidding.
On this show?
932 right now.
That's the Michael. I'm not kidding. We have Father Isaac on. We have Bishop Schneider on. This is the biggest live show we've ever done.
That's awesome.
You are definitely a fan favorite. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for checking us out. We will see you guys on Thursday night. I think it's just me and Rob Thursday night. We're going to do an off the rails for Margot.
Yep, just for Margot.